Welcome! A few years ago I built this 12-foot workbench as part of the tools I needed to construct my own aircraft. Since then, I've received numerous requests for details on how I made the table. While this isn't my personal design, the author of the plans put significant effort into minimizing material waste. Recognizing that you don't need to be building an aircraft to appreciate a near laser level work surface, and realizing I could no longer find detailed step-by-step plans online to share, I've decided to document how I built the table. I hope this guide will help others create the same functional, efficient workspace. Let's get started. Back in 2006, on the ch601.org website, within the Homemade Tools section, there was a link for a very well-designed 4-foot by 12-foot perfectly flat table. It is very well engineered. In this video, we'll cover the construction of that table from start to finish. It took me about a week to build. Things were cheaper then. Back in 2006, it cost me $160.51 to make this table. Let's dig into details. We start this project with two 2x4s by 8 feet. We will set those aside for a minute. We need 4 1x2s by 8 feet. We need 11 2x2s by 8 feet. We need 1 sheet of 3/8 inch plywood, lower grade. And we need 2 sheets of 3/4 inch tongue and groove plywood. First, let's cut the 2x4s into table legs. We need 6 table legs, 31 7/8 inch long. Now here is how we cut the 2 sheets of 3/4 inch plywood. Cut the first piece in half, creating 2 pieces 2 feet by 8 feet, parts A and B shown here. On the second sheet of plywood, cut the sheet in half widthwise, creating 2 sheets 4x4. Set one aside for a moment. With the remaining piece, cut it in half, creating 2 pieces 2x4. These are parts C and D shown here. It is important that I show where the tongue and grooves are located on these sheets of plywood, because next I'm going to show you how they fit together to make your tabletop. The tongue on B and D will fit into the grooves on C and A. Notice the remaining pieces to the right. We'll deal with that one next. First, cut the overall length down to 42 3/4 inches. Next, cut the plywood into 8 pieces approximately 6 inches wide and 42 3/4 inches long. I say approximately as you need to ensure you take into consideration the thickness of the saw blade. Each piece will be slightly less than 6 inches, which is perfect. The important point is that you get 8 pieces 42 3/4 inches long out of this half sheet of plywood. Now, using 2 of these 8 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood and our 1x2s, we will make 2 I-beams. This leaves us with 6 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. We will set these pieces aside just for a moment. Let's move on to our 3/8 inch plywood. We will start by ripping the entire sheet of 3/8 plywood into 8 even width strips approximately 6 inches wide by 8 feet long. Using the 2 strips closest to us, we will then cut these into 4 pieces 42 3/4 inches long. Using these 4 pieces of 3/8 plywood and our remaining 6 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood, as well as our 2x2s cut into 42 3/4 inch lengths, we will make 5 box beams. Notice the different thicknesses of the plywood that make up these box beams. 4 are made of 3/4 inch tongue and groove, and 2 are made of 3/8. Again, the goal here is to maximize the use of our material. We are not wasting anything. Now, let's go back to our 3/8 plywood, the part we haven't used yet, and see how we cut it. We need 4 pieces 8 feet long and 4 pieces 4 feet long. This will use up the entire sheet minus the 2 little pieces in the bottom. This is where we begin to build our 12-foot long box beams. Now, Notice how the joints are staggered. The 2x2 core pieces are assembled with a 4-foot and then an 8-foot, where the 3/8 plywood is an 8-foot and then a 4-foot. When assembled with glue and screws, you'll end up with a solid 12-foot long box beam. We need 2 of them. Here is a different angle so you can clearly see where the seams are. Here are the 2 assembled 12-foot long box beams. Now, all of our table parts are now manufactured. All we have to do is assemble the table. Okay, we have some theory. Let's apply it. Here's one of 2 I-beams under construction. Here's one of the 5 beams finished. Remember, there are 5 box beams altogether, 3 with 3/4 inch plywood and 2 with 3/8 plywood. This is one of the box beams made from 3/4 ply. Here, leaning against the shelving, I have the 12-foot tabletop assembled. Below that are the 2 12-foot box beams. I'll show more detail on how I got those so straight in a minute. And directly above that are the 3 3/4 inch box beams complete. Here I'm loosely assembling parts to see how they fit together. Now, notice the location of the I-beams. They are located at each end. They could actually go anywhere, but by placing the I-beams at the ends of the table, you're creating a perfect clamping area, either for the storage or the use of clamps to hold down work while you're working on it, or to enable a work light to be clamped in place. Now, back to the box beams. I needed this table to be straight, and I mean seriously straight. As initially, this table was built so I could build a wing, an aircraft wing, and it has to be straight. Any twist in the table would be captured in the wing. I ran a string down the entire length and then used 2 drill bits of equal size to gently lift the string off the beam. This worked quite well. It allowed me to visually check the gap between the string and the beam for consistency. One beam was perfect. The second one required further work. The electric planer did a nice job straightening out the beam that needed a little attention. Here is the finished 12-foot box beam. 2 12-foot box beams, 7 I-beams, and box beams cut to exactly 42 3/4 inches, and 6 31 7/8 inch long table legs. I used 2 bolts to attach each leg. Here are the 3 table legs attached to one of the 2 12-foot box beams. On the original plans, the author suggests that instead of using L brackets, save a little money and use metal drywall corner bead. I went to Home Depot and actually couldn't find any. Everything was replaced with plastic. I bought it anyway and mounted them, as you can see here. As you can see, I gave up on the plastic idea. Here's the first cross beam installed with a 2x2 joiner. I glued and screwed the 2x2 to the cross beam and used number 8 3-inch wood screws without glue to attach to the 12-foot beam. This will allow me to take it apart if we need to move it later. The beginning of our table. 6 or 7 days in, I can't remember, we have a finished frame structure. After the table was placed in its final resting area, I used shims to compensate for the unevenness of the concrete slab. For convenience, I placed a 4-plug receptacle close at hand. It's wired directly to the house. One finished table. On to our next project. Hey, thanks for watching.